Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan traveled to Beijing at the end of last week for the Olympic opening ceremonies and a meeting with President Xi. China is a neighbor, as is India, of course. On its other flank, Pakistan borders Iran and Afghanistan. That neighborhood makes Khan's country the hub of much intrigue and conflict. Prime Minister Imran Khan joins me now for an exclusive interview. Prime Minister Imran Khan, pleasure to have you here on, sir.
My pleasure, Fareed.
Let me first ask you about what for much of the world, and certainly for the United States, seems to be a very urgent situation, which is what is going on in Afghanistan. Pakistan is, of course, bearing the brunt of it. The UN estimates you have already taken in almost 2 million refugees. How bad are things on the ground, and what could happen in the next weeks or months if there isn't a change in the situation?
Well, Fareed, people in the US must understand one. Disliking Taliban government is one thing, but it's a question of 40 million, almost 40 million Afghans. Half of them are in a very precarious situation. So there's hunger, there's one of the Afghan winters is extremely wicked, ruthless. And so they're facing winter, they're food shortages, malnutrition. The next couple of months, everyone is worried that they could be one of the worst, or already developing into one of the worst humanitarian crises.
Have you found it easy to deal with the Taliban? Because what the U.S. concern is that the Taliban is not giving guarantees on women's rights and things like that. What is your experience and what is your advice to the U.S.?
Well, look, Fareed, what are the choices? Is there an alternative to Taliban right now? No, there isn't. Is there a chance that if the Taliban are squeezed, if the government is squeezed, there could be a change for the better? No. So the only alternative we have right now is to work with them and incentivize them in what the world wants: inclusive government, human rights, women rights in particular. That's the only way forward right now. And the flip side is, if they are abandoned or these sanctions stay there and the banking system has no liquidity left because of the sanctions, then the worry is that Afghanistan could go into chaos, humanitarian crisis, chaos. And then from Pakistan's point of view, we face two problems. We already have 3 million Afghan refugees. There were three terrorist groups operating from Afghanistan into Pakistan. Right now with the Taliban government, unfortunately, when the flood of refugees came, we have almost 250,000 Afghans crossing into Pakistan. Now, amongst them, unfortunately, have these terrorists. There's the Pakistani Taliban, which has conducted attacks inside Pakistan. There's the Baloch insurgents who've been conducting attacks, and especially recently. And then there's ISIL. So our best hope is that a stable Afghanistan will ensure stability or peace in Pakistan. But it's not just Pakistan, because if it goes into chaos, then we know why the United States first came to Afghanistan 20 years back. So therefore, it's in everyone's interest that this does not descend into chaos, the situation in Afghanistan.
Would you argue that the United States should recognize the Taliban government?
Well, sooner or later, the Taliban would have to be recognized. Now, the question is, the world wants some guarantees before they recognize the Taliban. So, how far is the US going to push the Taliban to actually conform to what they expect them in terms of human rights? Now, this is the question. Will the Taliban go all the way? Are they capable of going all the way? Bearing in mind that this is a very strong ideological movement. They represent a culture which is completely alien to the Western societies. So therefore, somewhere there has to be give and take, but not recognizing them and freezing their accounts and their banking system. The only people who are going to suffer is not the Taliban government, because no one can replace them right now. But what will happen is that half the population of Afghanistan, which is about 20 million people, are at a severe risk.
You were a very eloquent critic of U.S. policy in the broader Middle East, of Afghanistan, Pakistan, with regard to the military actions. You would always argue that those actions, the drone attacks and such, fed the forces that produce terrorism. Now, what I'm struck by is you have ISIS or ISIL attacking in Iraq, attacking in Syria, attacking in Pakistan, as you say, in Afghanistan. The U.S. is out. What is fueling the terrorism we are still seeing in the broader Middle East? Is it all Sunni versus Shia? Is it what are the roots of this terrorism now?
Well, the U.S. war on terror actually bred terrorists. I can tell you from the Pakistan's example, because Pakistan, by joining the US, we had 80,000 people dying in this joining the US war on terror. And we saw the war, as it went along, it produced more terrorists. And I'm convinced it's exactly the same what happened in Afghanistan. Because these night raids in Afghanistan, the drone attacks, really the United States must review this policy. We watched what happened there. They were telling people in the US that the drones were very accurate and they actually got the terrorists. Bombs exploding in villages. You know, how would they only get the terrorist? So there was a lot of collateral damage, and I'm afraid people in the US did not really, the public didn't know the amount of collateral damage. We bore the brunt, because what happened was we were considered collaborators of the US. So all the revenge attacks were against the Pakistani soldiers, against the people of Pakistan. There were suicide attacks going all over the country. We lost 80,000 people.
But the U.S. has withdrawn and the terror continues.
Much less. Fareed, you can't compare now. I mean, during the height of this war on terror, Islamabad was a fortress. I mean, you had suicide attacks going everywhere. So, compared to what used to happen now, terrorism is almost insignificant now.
Prime Minister, you're just back from China, and I want to ask you, you have strongly supported China, including in its actions in Xinjiang. You're the leader of one of the largest Muslim countries in the world. The United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, as you know, have boycotted the Olympics diplomatically because they say China is engaging in what they term a cultural genocide against Muslims in Xinjiang. Do you see it differently?
Fareed, firstly, we had our ambassador, Abinul Haq. He went to Xinjiang, and according to his observations, the picture is not what was being portrayed on the Western media. But more importantly, from our point of view in Pakistan, Kashmir is a disputed territory between Pakistan and India. Over the last 35 years, approximately, the figure varies, about 100,000 Kashmiris have died. Since 5th August 2019, the Indians have revoked the status of Kashmir, which unilaterally, which is, according to the United Nations Security Council, a disputed territory between Pakistan and India. There are extrajudicial killings going on. There are no rights there. There's clampdown there. There are 800,000 Indian troops in the Kashmir Valley. Now, I find it very difficult that there is hardly any indignation about what is happening in Kashmir compared to what is happening or what they say is happening in Xinjiang. So that's where I disagree with this. We as Pakistanis feel very strongly that this should be even-handed. Yes, if firstly, Kashmir is different because it's disputed between Pakistan and India, confirmed by the United Nations Security Council resolution. So for us, this is the immediate issue right now. And I'm afraid it just doesn't get the attention it deserves.
Are you saying that the treatment of Muslims in Kashmir is worse than the treatment of Muslims in Xinjiang?
There would be absolutely no comparison. And I only have one source, and this is our ambassador in China, who's compared the two. There is no comparison there. I mean, in Kashmir, what is happening is criminal.
But whatever is happening in Kashmir, do you condemn what is happening in China to Muslims there?
If I believe the Western media, unfortunately, right now, Fareed, we are sadly, and I hope it doesn't happen, we're heading towards another Cold War. And we all know once, these sides are taken, then do you believe which side do you believe? Because two sides are completely different. What China is saying is completely different to what the US is saying, or the Western media is saying. So who do you believe? That's why we asked our ambassador to give us his opinion. And it's not, what is appearing in the Western media. But my point is that right now, what should not happen is that we should not be heading towards another Cold War. And because then there's a lot of propaganda involved and you don't know what the truth is.
Let me ask you about relations with India. This is a topic everybody in the world is concerned about because, of course, both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons. Do you see any prospect for a greater degree of peace, better relations, more trade, more tourism, all the kind of things that would lift the economies of both India and Pakistan?
Well, Fareed, as you would know, I'm probably one of those Pakistanis who knows India and understands India much more than, the rest of my own countrymen and probably all over the world. And so because of my friendships in India and my relations with all sorts of, whether it was media, it was politicians. So the moment my government came into power, the first thing I did was reach out to India. And I said, look, you come one step towards us, we'll go two towards you. And our only issue is Kashmir. And we should solve it like good neighbors on the dialogue table. But unfortunately, there's a tragedy unfolding in India. An ideology, the RSS ideology has taken over India. And we all know, and right now we have this, we are in this day of information technology. All you have to do is Google who were the founding fathers of RSS, which the ideology that rules India right now, and who were they inspired by, by the Nazis. This is all what I'm saying can easily be verified. So it's a racist ideology which has taken over India. Remember, 3 times the RSS was considered a terrorist organization, an ideology that assassinated the great Gandhi. So therefore, it's very difficult to come to terms with this ideology. And, my experience has been, I tried everything, made overtures, but unfortunately, how do you deal with it? An ideology which is based on hate, racial superiority and hate for Muslims, minorities, Christians, and of course, Pakistan. So we haven't made any headways. But my worry is, Fareed, what is going on in India right now is much, much more damaging for India than for Pakistan right now. We just have our relationship as frozen. But events in India and the India I knew, I think it's of great concern.
In the atmosphere you're describing, though, one does worry. One terrorist attack, one miscalculation on the border could spiral out of control. Does that worry you?
Yes. In fact, I went to my first speech in the United Nations. I raised this concern because what happened was there was an attack in India. A Kashmiri youth blew himself up on an Indian military convoy. And Pakistan was blamed. And I immediately asked them, look, if you have any evidence that Pakistan was involved, we'll take action. But rather than giving us any evidence, they plain bombed us. And so Pakistan also retaliated and their plane was shot down. We immediately returned the pilot just to tell them that, look, we had no plans of escalation. So, it could easily have escalated. And therefore, I think this, which is why when I met President Trump, I asked him that, the most powerful country it's very important to solve this Kashmir issue because it's been festering. The world community has pledged to the Kashmiris that they would be able to decide their own destiny. And if this issue keeps continuing, there's always a chance that, two nuclear powers could be confronting each other. So yes, the answer to your question is, yes, it concerns me.
Imran Khan, pleasure to have you on.
Okay, Fareed, thanks a lot.